Another one is this one right here, Beyond Chutzpah. I know I'm not saying that very well. I apologize. Written by Norman G. Finkelstein. This is a book that I want to read, and it really focuses on how anti-Semitism gets appropriated and misused to then support anti-Arab sentiments. And the picture that you see on the cover is actually of the wall that has been built and is continuing to be built in the Palestinian territories to divide, first of all, Palestinian territories among themselves and also from Israel, and basically creating this big prison where Palestinians live. Another book is this one right here, Peace Under Fire, Israel, Palestine, and the International Solidarity Movement. And the International Solidarity Movement are folks from around the world, obviously as the name implies, who volunteer and get trained in anti-violence, pro-peace methods to go and support the population in the Palestinian territories and in Israel too. So your everyday people who struggle to make life happen for themselves, who have a hard time getting to work, children who get killed on their way to school every day. So these are folks who really risk their lives to go and make sure that people can function on a daily basis. So this is just a collection of accounts from them. From their, like it says here, from their weblogs and diaries of ISM volunteers, news articles, press releases, writings from the Kfoury and Herndl families, Rachel Corey's last email home and cover photograph by Tom Herndl reveals the real horror of life under occupation and describes the first signs of a new wave of international solidarity. For folks who don't know Rachel Corey, I highly recommend you Google her. Her death is definitely a tragedy. She was an ISM volunteer, and she was run over basically by a bulldozer when she wanted to stop these bulldozers running down a Palestinian family's house. I wanted to focus in on something right here. There's a foreword in this book by Edward Said. He was one of the most formidable intellectuals. He's Palestinian, was Palestinian. He was recently deceased. And when it comes to Palestinian authors and writers, he definitely comes to mind most often than not by anybody who knows anything about Palestinian writers. His book Orientalism is a classic for sure. So recommending stuff by Edward Said. Now I want to focus a little bit on books on Lebanon. So aside from the Great War for Civilization that I mentioned before, books that I have read, I don't have copies of here with me. I'm just going to mention right now. One is Jean Said Makdisi's Beirut Fragments, and this is just a first-hand account of families, middle class at the time families' struggles when the war in Beirut hit, and talking about that, the burning down of the city, basically. And Kamal Salibi's A House of Many Mansions, the History of Lebanon Reconsidered. So that's a very, very in-depth look into the history of Lebanon. And as the name implies, The House of Many Mansions, it is a very, very, very complicated history that a lot of people try to oversimplify. It is a very, very complex history and still is a very, very complex country and political animal, if you will. So, and here are some books that I haven't read yet about Lebanon. This one right here, Inside Lebanon, Journey to a Shattered Land with Gnome and Carol Chomsky. I don't know much about this book, to be honest. I bought it because it was about Lebanon. It's by Chomsky, and it was cheap, so that is why I really got that. But I also have read Noam Chomsky's book, Perilous Power, The Middle East and U.S. Foreign Policy, Dialogues on Terror, Democracy, War, and Justice, which is actually more of a dialogue. It's not a book as much as it's a dialogue between Noam Chomsky and Gilbert Achcar, talking about the Middle East and U.S. foreign policy. So it's very, very interesting to read just this conversation going on between these two men. Then another Robert Fisk book. This was actually his first really, really famous book, Pity the Nation, The Abduction of Lebanon, which, again, I'm very much looking forward to reading this because of how long Robert Fisk has lived there and has reported from Lebanon. And this is, again, another very, very thick book. So I definitely am saving this for a time when I have a whole lot of time. This book I started reading at one point, Rafiq Hariri and the Fate of Lebanon. Rafiq Hariri basically rebuilt Lebanon after the war. I'm not sure how I feel about this book, to be honest. It's very much Rafiq Hariri centric. And when it comes to current politics in Lebanon, I'm not really sure on 100% where I stand on it. I mean, he was definitely, rebuilding the country, and a lot of people were very, very grateful for him and everything that he's done. And he made wonders happen after the war, and considering the devastation in that country. At the same time, it came primarily from a U.S.-centric capitalist kind of way of rebuilding. So he had his negative consequences on particularly working class people, and Shiite Muslims in particular didn't really see the benefits that Rafiq Hariri was bringing to the rest of the country. So there's still, there's always two sides to every coin, as they say, or multiple sides to every coin, to be honest. But definitely a visionary, and this was, he was assassinated, and his assassination is still a contemptuous issue in Lebanon. So this really talks about the effects of his death also. And then finally I have this book with me. This is called Barid Mustaqil. My Arabic is not very good, so I probably didn't say that completely accurately. But this is from the perspective of queer women and queer trans people in Lebanon. And it's just stories, just reflections and short stories by queer women and trans folks. So this is amazing to have my hands on this at this point. And while definitely not the first queer book out of the Middle East by any stretch of the imagination, it's still a phenomenal piece to come through. And just looking at some of the titles of the story, I'm very excited to read this. So, like, The Hunt for a Gay Husband, The Lesbian Relationship Myths, How High School Crushed Me, Trans Lebanon, The Motorcycle Gender, Shab wala Bint, which means boy or girl. Our We live in a ruthless society. Transgender, not translucent. My hijab and I. So the titles alone just make me very, very interested in reading this. In the beginning was the feminist, and the feminist was queer. I'm gonna flip to real quick the section that talks about what Barid Mustaqil means and why it's called that. So let's see. Around here. We decided on the more ambiguous Barid Mustaqil as a name for our book. Barid Mustaqil has a very close meaning to express mail, but a better translation would be mail in a hurry. It reflects both the urgency of getting these stories across and also the private nature of the stories, like letters written, sealed, and sent out to the world. In a way, the journey of these stories is similar to the stories themselves. They have come out of the closet. So, a lot of really, really cool books, but like I said, I buy these things a lot faster than I read them. One last one that I'll recommend that I don't have with me that I've read is Reza Aslan's No God But God, especially for folks who have a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of misperception and misinformation on the current state of affairs when it comes to terrorism and the role of Islam and the Middle East and everything that going on. I think this book sheds a lot of light into that. It tries to answer the questions of why that people have. Of course, no one book is going to answer that question. There is no one answer to the question of why when it comes to violence of that nature. but it really talks about the evolution of Islam, a little bit of its history and kind of its current state of affairs, and why this is just a natural part of all major religions, that it goes through a very, very, very violent stage, and how most of the violence is really targeted towards other Muslims and not Christians and Jews and other religions, or the West as a whole, or as it's seen to be from the media. But those are this was a little book tour that I wanted to give folks. I hope it was interesting. Obviously, this is just a few books out there. There's definitely a lot more. And thank you, Robin, for asking me to give you some ideas on books to read. I hope this was helpful.